So all of us that play Escape from Tarkov are familiar with the scav leg meta meme. It's easy to take shitty experience of getting both of your legs blacked out by a Taz scav from 75 meters away and assume that's the norm. It's easy to only remember the times when shitty stuff like that happens to you and ignore all the times when a scav is standing right next to you with a shotgun and misses every single shot. So what I wanted to do kind of once and for all, until they patch something of course, was collect a bunch of data, do a little bit of science to try to answer the question definitively and objectively of whether or not scav leg meta is a real thing. So hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so first let me be clear about what exactly I mean by scav leg meta. I'm referring to the idea that the AI in Escape from Tarkov prioritizes shooting players in their legs as opposed to other parts of their body. This isn't a discussion about whether or not you should use leg meta as a strategy, like when you have an MP5 against a guy wearing a face shield. It's specifically about the behavior of NPCs in the game and the distribution of their shots on players. I want to make it clear up front that I came into this with a few hypotheses that might explain what we've experienced, as well as some assumptions about how the game works in general. If you paid attention in science class, you'd already know that any good science experiment starts with one or more falsifiable hypotheses. An experiment should be designed with controls in place such that alternative explanations are rendered unlikely. This experiment is not perfect, but it was my best attempt at a fair and honest analysis. My first hypothesis was that the entire leg meta phenomenon can be explained simply with the idea that lots of players wear armor, lots of scavs use shotguns shoot buckshot with a wide spray pattern, and if they aim center of mass, the spray is mostly eaten up by the armor and the rest will hit the limbs, primarily the legs. My second hypothesis was that scavs aim at different parts of the body depending on what sort of armor the PMC is wearing. For example, if a scav sees you wearing a Fort and Fast, it's possible they're clever enough to aim for the exposed legs instead of center of mass. The final hypothesis, the one I thought was least likely, came from one of Nikita's comments on the Talking Tarkov podcast.
If you will target the chest or even stomach, they will drop. The projectiles will be dropped to the legs, and this is why leg meta exists.
With these hypotheses in mind, I designed the experiment to attempt to determine which factor or factors are relevant to the distribution of scav shots on PMC bodies. All of the tests were done in offline mode in order to make it easier to gather as large a data set as possible in a reasonable amount of time. I have no reason to believe that the AI behaves differently offline than they do online, but if that's the case, then this experiment is definitely flawed and would need to be redone online. Each test began with a specific loadout and scenario. I would find and approach a scav on various maps, ensure my entire body was exposed, and I was in the open but still near cover. I would allow them to shoot me once, and then quickly get to cover to record the part or parts of my body that were hit. I would then fully heal and continue the experiment until one of my body parts was blacked out or I was killed. In order to control for the first hypothesis, namely that armor soaks up all the buckshot with the rest hitting the legs, I controlled for two sets of variables, whether armor was on or off, and the type of gun the scav was using. If armor is soaking up all the damage that would otherwise be hitting center of mass, we should expect to see the same amount of leg damage whether we have armor on or not, but we should expect to see increased damage to the chest and stomach when not wearing armor. If buckshot spread is the culprit, we should also expect leg damage to go away when scavs were using anything other than a shotgun. Testing with and without armor also serves to test a second hypothesis, namely that scavs see armor and aim for legs in response. If this is true, scavs should hit the player's legs more often when they're wearing armor compared to when they aren't. Testing the final theory, bullet drop, was done by getting shot by scavs at varying distances to see if being close or far from them alters the distribution of their shots. For the sake of time, I broke up the distances into two primary categories: close range, or within 15 meters, and long range, anything above about 20 meters. I also tested with various elevation differences, such as a sniper scav on the roof shooting down at a player on ground level, as well as the player standing up on a hill or rooftop above as the scav shoots up. Okay, enough blabbering. On to the results. I compiled all of the data into a number of spreadsheets, tracking the number of hits on different body parts with a number of different segmentations specifically chosen to try to answer some of the questions we asked earlier. The numbers were then turned into these horrifying Excel spreadsheet mutant heat map things you see here, where yellow indicates areas that were not hit frequently by scavs, and red indicating areas that were hit very frequently. Heat maps were generated for all the data segmented by whether or not armor was worn, distance to the scav, whether I was holding a pistol or a rifle to compare if the arm hitbox locations affected anything, and to compare distribution by each gun type the scav used. First, let's start with the overall shot distribution, combining all of the factors into one heat map. This looks like a fairly reasonable distribution in my opinion. Given that the torso is the majority of the player's hitbox, it makes sense to me that it would be hit approximately half the time. The head being the smallest hitbox only accounted for 4% of the hits, and the arms and legs are fairly similar in percentage as well. An interesting observation I had when looking at all this data was that the left arm was almost twice as likely to be hit as the right arm on average. My hypothesis for this currently is that the left hand is usually more out in front of the gun, holding the grip portion of the rifles, or across the torso a little bit more when holding a pistol. So given that most of the shots hit the chest, many of them actually hit the left arm and penetrate into the chest afterwards, which was something that I experienced frequently during the testing. Let's take a look at the first hypothesis we discussed in this video, which was trying to determine if shotguns and/or armor were the primary cause of the experience of leg meta. When we compare the hit distribution from scavs separated by the type of gun they use, pistol and SMG, rifles and shotguns, there doesn't appear to be any correlation between the type of gun used and where on the body scavs tend to hit the most. Comparing the distribution between when I did not wear armor versus when I did, again, there doesn't seem to be any noticeable difference when comparing the two or with the overall distribution. Seems to me like the first two hypotheses having to do with shotguns and/or armor causing leg meta are pretty well debunked at this point. Now, out of curiosity, I wanted to compare the heat maps for when my PMC was holding a pistol versus holding a rifle, and again here we don't see a significant divergence between them. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting. When segmenting the data based on distance, again, close range being about under 15 meters, and long range being between about 20 and 75 meters, it appears to me to be a pretty fucking drastic difference. We can clearly see that overall at close range, scavs hit chest and arms almost exclusively, and headshots, gut shots, and leg shots are all less than 7% of the hits combined. That means, in close range encounters with scavs using any gun, there's a 93% chance you will get hit in the chest or the arms. Looking at longer range shots, it's evident that there's something at work here, as getting shot in the chest and arms dropped from a 93% chance down to a 34% chance. The chances of getting shot in the gut or legs increased from 5% to 62%. Now, breaking down each of the heat maps, you can clearly see that this is independent of armor or gun type as we established earlier. It's clear that distance is in some way playing a significant role in the perceived leg meta. So at this point, I honestly have no idea if this is bullet drop or some other factors influencing where scavs are aiming or hitting. If this is bullet drop, then that indicates to me some sort of bug in the implementation of bullet travel for scavs. As a PMC, there's zero noticeable bullet drop within 100 meters, and at no point during this experiment did I measure being shot at distances close to or exceeding 100 meters, so there's no plausible reason why bullet drop should be a factor at all here. It's impossible to say without more information if they're aiming differently, if there's some sort of bug, or what. But it's pretty clear to me, given the data, that as long as we're talking about scavs at least 20 meters away from you, that leg meta is a real thing. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm sure there's a million ways to improve on this experiment. Given the resources and time that I have available, I couldn't think of any other methods for testing this. I didn't have the time to get perfect distance measurements, double-blind the study in some way, or get a larger sample size. I'm totally open to any critiques of the experiment, flaws in the design, faulty analysis of the data, or anything like that. I'd love for this to be an open dialogue so we can figure out if this is intended, what the explanation might be, and if it's a bug, work with Battlestate to help them fix it. I'm totally open to any attempts to replicate my findings as well. The more data, the better. I also want to make it a point to mention that I don't want this to come off as a hit to Battlestate or the developers in any way. They're doing an amazing job, and I'm confident that if this is something they're not aware of, and is indeed an issue, that they will resolve it. I did this out of my own curiosity and to educate myself and the community. So yeah, if you guys don't know me, I'm Veritas. I stream Tarkov on Twitch almost every weeknight, starting around 6 p.m. Eastern, and usually all day on the weekends. I put out regular highlight videos, I make meme parody music videos for Tarkov, as well as informational videos like the one that you just watched. If you aren't already following me on Twitch or sub to me on my YouTube, and if you enjoy the video, please hit the sub button if you want to watch more content like this. I put a huge amount of time and effort into this analysis, so if you learned something from this experiment or found it interesting, please give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. Thank you guys.